There we go. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time it might be where you are out there. Welcome back to the live stream. My name is Jeff Fritz, and this is C Sharp with CSharpFritz. It's so good to see you. How you doing out there, chat room? Good morning. If you're out here on the East Coast with me, we just got through here in the States. We just got through daylight savings time changeover, so that means everybody's dragging a little bit. It's an extra hour early for some of us. How are you doing out there? I'm seeing some friends pop into the chat room here. Let's welcome in the folks that are joining us here. Which button is it? It's this button, right? Oh, that's not the right one. Hang on, we got it. We've got this. We've got this. I know where they are. They're hiding over here. I know where they are. There we go. Hello. Good morning, Screamer83, ending with Allie. Good morning to you. Shy Sharp is here. Good afternoon to you. Is that Divit Gavar in South Africa? Good afternoon to you in South Africa. Simon is here. Good morning. Welcome. Thank you so much, Shy Sharp. Good to see you. I've got my Super C Sharp hat on today, and we're going to be talking more about getting started with Blazor. Now, Blazor is the user interface framework that so many of us that have been programming with ASP.NET Core are so excited about. There's a lot happening with this framework that makes it easier for us to build composable web applications. That is, our applications start off as a series of components, and we can use those components inside of other components and even pages to generate and build a web application. We've also got, so I've welcomed a couple folks here from Twitch. We've also got Learn TV running today. Hello to all the folks over there on Learn TV. I have Pubble Chat up, so if you have questions for me throughout the session, we are moderating. We are keeping an eye on things over there. Please drop a message, drop a question over there, and we will answer. Bring those to the forefront here and make sure that we have a good time chatting with you folks over there. And of course, if you're watching the recording out there on YouTube, maybe you have a question that somebody else asked during the session. Check the description just below for all the source code, for all the questions that were asked, along with tags to jump you right to that element of the video, as well as links to our music and the GitHub repository where the entire series is stored. We've got links to the entire playlist and all the demos that we've done here throughout the C Sharp with CSharpFritz series. All right, what do you say we get into some more Blazor here? This is a topic that I really enjoy. I am such a fan of working with building web applications, and with Blazor, it's really been something that that's fun, that I enjoy working with. It brings back some more ways to be not just productive, but have a good time and have fun, and seeing how things compose and go from smaller components to bigger components and make our web application lives easier. So let me head over to GitHub. We're working on a Linux machine today. I'm on my normal stream. We're running minimal March this month. That is all month long. We're working only at the command line. I'm not going to go quite that far here on the Visual Studio channel. We're going to use Visual Studio Code in Linux because one of the big questions that I always get is, gosh, you show us how to use Visual Studio, but how do we do this if we were on Linux, if we were on a Mac? So we're going to be using a Linux machine today and writing some code, writing some software together to show you can be productive. Everything that we're doing today does work on a Mac. It does work on Windows, and it does work in full Visual Studio. So no problem wherever you are. .NET will work. .NET will allow you to compile. You don't need to be on all the latest Microsoft things in order to work with Blazor. So let me head over to the code. Let's head over to our Linux machine, and I'll show you a little bit about what's going on here. And we're going to get some music playing in the background here from the Stream Beats playlist. This is Harris Heller's Lo-Fi playlist. We're going to listen to some of this music in the background. It just sounds groovy, and you're going to see a song indicator pop up at the top there. You can find this on Spotify, Amazon Music, Apple Music. Check it out. It's free for you to use, royalty-free, DMCA-free. Streambeats.com. Thank you so much, Harris. We appreciate you letting us listen to your music while we write some code together and learn together today on stream. So, this is the GitHub repository where everything for our series is stored, and I'm looking here and realizing it's not. I don't quite have this set correctly. No, I was right. We're good. Yeah, we're good. So this is the GitHub repository with everything for the series. github.com/CSharpFritz/C# with CSharpFritz, and you'll see all the notebooks that we had here from the beginning. Things from our last series about ASP.NET Core, and this series that we're doing now about Blazor. So if you're watching the recording, drive down into the sessions folder here. There is a season 3. There'll be a 0302 folder here when I merge in the changes and the demos that we go through today. You'll be able to see all the demo code, step through it, pull it apart, take a look at it, break it, figure out what makes it tick, help yourself learn a little bit more about how Blazor works, how Blazor components work. And I'll be happy to answer your questions that you post in the comments just below the YouTube video. Of course, if you're watching on Twitch and Learn TV, we'll answer your questions today. All right. So I've got chat up. I'm keeping an eye on things over here from Learn TV and from the Visual Studio Twitch channel. How you doing there, Nico? And is that Senor Gonzalez? Hello, welcome in. So let's talk about this. Let's talk about components in Blazor. Let's review where we were when this whole thing started, when this Blazor thing started. So I have Visual Studio Code running, and this is one of the default pages that comes with the template when you create a new Blazor application, right? We remember when you create a new Blazor application with the command line, you get the .NET new, not .NET, but when you create a new application, you get one of these templates. These are the same templates that you have in Visual Studio 2019. But if we page up here, right? Of course, we've got console applications, class libraries, MVC applications, ASP.NET Core, but in particular, we're looking at these two right here, Blazor Server and Blazor WebAssembly. Now, for the purposes of what we're talking about today, components, Blazor Server and Blazor WebAssembly function the same. Your components will render identically, whether they're running on the server or they're running on WebAssembly and being rendered in the browser. Your components just generate HTML. Now, they could be generating HTML on the server, and a web server delivers that HTML into the browser, or in WebAssembly's case, they've been delivered as DLLs into the browser, as binary code that the browser will crack open, execute, and paint on the screen when your visitor navigates to it. So this is where we're working today, is inside the Blazor WebAssembly template. Like I said, they both work the same. No big deal about and we don't need to get confused about working between the two types of project models. They do the same thing. And our initial page that we get when we load the application looks like this. Now, that's kind of cheesy. Hello world, welcome to your new app. But then we have this thing, this survey prompt. Now, survey prompt isn't an HTML5 tag. This is a component. And components in Blazor, they look like what you might call a directive or a web component in other web languages when you're using this type of markup. So when I go over to my browser and we actually look at that running, I get my hello world, and I get this survey component is this bit at the bottom. Hello, how is Blazor working for you? This is that component. Okay, so I've only referenced it with this survey prompt tag here, and it turns into this how is Blazor working for you element on the page. Now, that's kind of compelling. That's kind of interesting because I can now reuse that component in other places by just putting this tag on there. But where is survey prompt? Is that something hiding from me? Where do I find that thing? All components in Blazor have the same tag name as their file name. So survey prompt is being generated by a template called surveyprompt.razor. And it's sitting here in this shared folder right there, surveyprompt.razor. And here it is. It's a little box that has the alert classes on it from Bootstrap. It has the open icon set for the pencil icon that we saw at the beginning, and this title thing here. Now, we remember from our work with Razor templates that at and something after it turns into some C#. This at title says, go find me a C# property or field named title and put its contents right here between the strong tags. Okay, so down here we have our code block, and in Blazor we can mash up our code and our markup in the same file. And I have a property here called title. So whatever's in the title property is what's being output there on line 3, where it says title. That's pretty good. Okay, I can understand that. Now, what's different and makes this interesting is this parameter attribute on here. And we're going to talk a little bit more about parameter attributes as we look at more components. The parameter attribute says this property, this title property, is an attribute on the survey prompt component. So now we're creating attributes that you might have on tags, like we see with span class or a target tag, or the class attribute that we have up here. Those attributes can be built on our components with this parameter tag. Now we've got some power. Okay, so if I go back to that index page that we had open, wrong index page. There we go. So there's my survey prompt, and it has a title. So there's the title string that's being passed into our survey prompt component. How we doing there, chat room? It's been a little quiet, and I'm not seeing anything over there from our friends on Learn TV. Going well? Doing well? Check in here and make sure. Listening, very good. Hey, CTI Geek and Eve Dobra, good to see you. Just getting into coffee? Yep, absolutely. I can agree with you on that. It's a property like other JavaScript frameworks. That's right. That's right. Nima Vex. Everything's fine. Very interesting. Awesome. So, I mean, this kind of makes sense. Now, the difference between a page and a component is that a page has this page directive. We call these directives in Razor templates. So at page, quote, / means that this page answers for the root of our application. So now we can specify, we can do a little bit here to make this to set up routing and answer at different locations throughout our application. That's the only difference between a component and a page. So I can actually reference other pages inside of this page and put its content inside of here. Ooh, okay. So one of the default pages that comes with the template is this counter page, and you see it answers on /counter, right? And we've seen this before. I click through to the counter demo, and there's this button, and I can click that, and big deal, it counts up. But this is a Razor template. This is a Blazor page, but a Blazor page is also a component. So I can go into index here, and beneath my survey prompt, I can start typing counter, and because Visual Studio Code has IntelliSense in it, it says, I know what a counter is, a counter component. And I can just reference that, save, and I can, let me go back to my previous, so I have .NET Watch Run happening here, so it's going to rebuild whenever I make changes inside of my application. But I'll go back over here and go to my index page, and now my counter is inside my index page. So I'm starting to nest and reuse other pages inside this page. So think about it. Maybe you have a tabbed interface and you want folks to be able to click around it and also be able to navigate directly to pages and not be in that tabbed interface. You can use this type of structure to pass around and interact with your application. Let me go back over to the chat room. I see a couple questions here I want to make sure that I answer. Say hello to some folks before we get in and get into the next concept here. Which folder have I opened, asks Senor Gonzalez. So I am, if we take a look in here, I am working in, this is in the session 0302 branch right now. And if you're watching the recording, you can go find this. This is in 0302 components, and I am in the demo project. This is where we're working right now. And I'm down in the pages folder looking at the index. So that'll help you out there. All right. So simple components that we're passing around. Let me come to some more of these questions, comments that we have here. Dev Nelson, good morning to you in Brazil. Good morning, Guacamole. Hello, hello. Good evening to you, Nico in Indonesia. MDE Bruin, let me queue up that question. That is one of the most common questions that we get. And let me go through here. Answer a couple more questions. Hey, Freya, good morning. Well, good evening to you, Freya. Good to see you. Kodrako, hello. Welcome in. All right, let me answer some of these questions. I'm going to start with this question from, is this, Kademel asks, is this server-side or WebAssembly? Not a problem. Happy to bring you back up to speed. This is WebAssembly that I'm using. WASM, that's an acronym for WebAssembly. However, for the components topic that we're talking through today, it doesn't matter if you're using Blazor server-side or if you're using Blazor WebAssembly. Everything that we're doing today works the same with both templates, with both configurations of Blazor. They're both rendering HTML and they're both delivering content. It's just that rendering is going to happen either in server-side, of course, on a web server, and delivering that HTML, or it's with WebAssembly being rendered inside the browser and repainting a section of the browser. So we're doing this with WebAssembly today, but never fear, works the same in both configurations. MDE Bruin asks, would have been great if you could separate the HTML code from the C# code. So this is one of the top questions that we get, and I want to make sure that I answer this. This is something that it demonstrates the flexibility of Blazor. You can build your content the way that makes sense for you and your application. Let me explain. You can, if you don't want your HTML and C# code to be in the same file, like that's right, Lomas. Just like in React, right? In React, you can mash up your JavaScript and your HTML in one file. So you have your template and your script all in one file. You can do that also here. If I go over to the counter, I have this block of code down here. I can move that into a code behind file. And the code behind file has quite simply the exact same name, counter Razor CS. And if I make sure I namespace this correctly, so my namespace is demo pages. And if I make this a public partial class called counter, okay, this is the other half of that counter template that we saw, I can take this code and drop it right in here, go back over to my my .NET command line here, get that restarted here, and I can see that oh, I forgot to save the counter file. There we go. Now it'll rebuild, and we'll be able to take a look at that over in, I already have Firefox running, and it does and works the same way. So you have flexibility if you want to put your C# code in your .razor file and just work with those objects that are exposed in the public, those members that are exposed you want to interact with inside of your template. Put all your business logic in the class behind it. You can do that. You have that flexibility if that's how you would like to write code. However, for these simple samples that we're showing today, we're not getting into complex business logic. We're really talking about how to work with and build components. It's just easier to show everything on one screen. So I'm keeping the code in the same file as the .razor template. So flexibility, it's up to you how you want to structure your files. But like I said, for demo purposes, we'll let you know, we'll put these all in one file. Not a problem, MDE Bruin. No need to apologize. This is a very common question because there are folks that would like to have their business logic, some of their template logic, separated and in another file where maybe they want to unit test that C# code separately from their HTML template. You wish that was the default? A lot of folks delete the initial files right away. So it's pretty easy to set this up. It is, let me see here. This is new for ZTimus. Okay, cool. Happy to, please, the AMA tag is on here. Ask any question you'd like. We're happy to get into and talk through how this works and make sure that we answer your questions and get you successful with what we're doing with Blazor. I see a couple questions here about what Linux distro I'm using. Not a problem. We'll get into that. So there's a question about the Linux distro I'm using. This is Kubuntu that I'm using. This is Ubuntu with KDE on top of it. And I'm having a real good time using this on a laptop that's been configured specifically for running Linux. So I am running directly on the metal with this laptop. ZTimus asks, C# and HTML. Is this ASP stuff? The same group makes this framework, but it is not ASP.NET proper. Right? This is .NET 5. It's not web forms, but this is the new user interface framework that we work with. So yeah, we wanted to show a little bit of .NET on Linux. And when we get into May is for Macs. We'll be working with .NET on a Mac when we get into May. So speaking of different operating systems, Ramides has a question here. Why should anyone use a Windows system for hosting and developing with the .NET stack? LAMP is king for decades. To be fair, the internet's been around for 25 years. I wouldn't say decades, but in corporate environments, developing and building on a Windows stack is very popular because it comes with Active Directory built in. It comes with all the security built in. So when you log into your machines, you're logged in automatically to your browser, and all that credential information flows through into the applications. So you get security baked into your ASP.NET applications by default, using those folks that are already logged in, the credentials, the authentication information for the browser, for the Windows machine. So with very little work, you end up with a very secure system that you can then set up your authorization policies inside of your ASP.NET application that will enforce and properly restrict or allow folks to use various features. So the .NET stack first off, is the fastest web stack available on the internet. Check out the Tech Empower benchmarks. Don't take my word for it. Check out third-party benchmarks on that. But building and delivering on Windows, you get the security, you get Active Directory built in, and great support for interacting with things on the Windows system if you need to access Windows features to build and deploy things inside of your ASP.NET application. Yes, you can host with Linux. And you can host ASP.NET Core. You can put ASP.NET Core inside of a Docker container, deploy that way, and run it on whatever operating system you would like that hosts that Docker container. So whether it's Ubuntu Linux like I have here, maybe it's a Windows machine, maybe it's even a Raspberry Pi where you're deploying to somewhere in the cloud and you want to run dozens of containers using Kubernetes, ASP.NET Core has you covered. So, yeah, this is very straightforward stuff. That's right, Z-Timus. That's the goal here. We want to make sure that Blazor and building web applications is very straightforward and that the technology gets out of your way. We don't want you to have to think about threading. We don't want you to have to think about multitasking. We don't want you to have to think about standing up and handling requests and processing things. Get out of your way and let's let you focus on what you do best. And that's building and interacting with your business rules, building and interacting with your subject matter, because you're the expert in that. Get the technology out of the way, and let's make it real easy for you to do what your application needs to do. So this is how, coming back into the sample here, this is how we can reuse other pages as components inside of Blazor. Now that's kind of cool. That's a nice start to get us in there. Yeah, thank you for the love there. Now, let's talk about getting other components together here. Let's talk about building components and passing information around here. So we just brought in the counter component, big deal. Let's write a component and we're going to make use of my hat collection because it's a simple thing, a simple object that we can interact with and just kind of makes sense. So I've created a hat component called hat display, and I've got a data type called hat sitting inside of my project. So with my hat display component, I can execute it with this hat display tag, and I can pass in that string property name, Blazor hat, and format and place some content on screen. Let me show you what this looks like. This is the hat display component, and I'm using a bootstrap card here. I've got a card header, and I'm just like we saw with the survey prompt, I've got a little parameter here called name, and I reference the name property there on line 5 to just output it inside of that H5 that I've made my card title. This is Bootstrap 101 here to build a card. Simple layout, simple set of classes. It's a little bit of div overkill, but I've got card headers, card body, and not bad. It formats nicely, and I get a little card with the name that I passed in, Blazor hat, and this is one of Fritz's hats. So, right, I can go back over, and the page that I have this in is over here, and I have hat display like this, right, and I can put another one down here, and we can put, right, super C#, save that, and this is going to refresh in a second, and now I've got a second card, and it's got the second. Big deal. Okay. So you've put the component on there twice, and you didn't have to do anything, and it formats and outputs that. Okay. So, where do we go from here? That's fine, but there was a lot of, look at this component. Let me go back to that hat display. Look at this, right? I've got header and I've got card body, and I may want to pass in some of that structure. Maybe I don't always have a header. Maybe I have just card bodies that I want to pass in when I format my hat here. What can we do with that? Okay. So there's a feature we're going to get into next called child components, and we're going to start to build out a little bit of a component hierarchy. Let me go back over to chat and let me answer a couple questions here. I don't see any questions coming in from Learn TV. I have Pubble open here and I don't see any messages coming in. I'm not sure if that's me, but I do see the right, let me make sure. Yeah, it says I'm live. So I don't know if there's nobody asking questions over there, but I'm keeping an eye on Learn TV. Let me go to these questions that I have here from Twitch. Let me grab this. There's a couple of questions here. You don't find the demo project. I'll show you where this is again. This hasn't been merged into the main branch. This is in the session 0302 branch. And you will find it in this location. Down under sessions season 03. Turbo Nautilus, that's getting a little bit ahead of us. Do I know if Maui will support Web Renderer 2? Just play a little around with Flutter to make web apps, but to have a .NET ecosystem with me would be a lot better than learning a new language and a relatively new ecosystem around it. So what we've seen already with the .NET 6 previews, and that's what Turbo Nautilus is referring to here, the new .NET Maui user interface framework that's shipping with .NET 6 in November. So we're good 8 months ahead of time here. .NET Maui allows you to embed Blazor inside of mobile applications on iOS and Android, Windows applications, and Mac applications. So you're able to take everything that we're doing here with our Blazor components and put it into Maui, not the other way around. Maui into the web. So Maui ends up being what you use to deploy to directly onto a machine, and you can put Blazor inside of it. So you get this nice composition that happens, and you're going to see more coming from the Blazor team as they put these components and tooling together to support the various ways that you can interact. So we're very excited about what you're going to be able to do with Blazor and Maui and desktop applications coming up with .NET 6, but we're about 8 months ahead on that. We're talking about what you can do today using Blazor and WebAssembly. I'll answer this question from Ramirez. I don't like the UWP stuff Microsoft is forcing on developers lately. Disagree, not forcing on developers. UWP was a concept that the Windows team put out, a application model. You don't need to use UWP, Universal Windows Platform, to build Windows applications. You can very much use WPF, the Windows Presentation Foundation, or Windows Forms to build desktop applications if you'd like. Both of those application models, Windows Forms and WPF, can be compiled up, can be deployed using the Windows Store. You can do this. The concepts, the things that you're seeing around XAML and how you can take content from UWP and use it inside of WPF, around the project reunion concepts, that's very much something that you can do. But none of this is a requirement to build applications for Windows. So this is all about choice, and you're going to see more of this choice and flexibility as we get further into .NET 6, when Maui becomes available, and you can use Maui to build .NET Maui to build applications that work on Windows, Mac, iOS, and Android. One code base works on all 4 operating systems. No. WPF and WinForms are not deprecated. Anybody who tells you that is lying. They are not deprecated, not by any stretch of the imagination. In fact, there are teams actively working on adding new features to both frameworks. If you don't believe me, you're more than welcome to check out the GitHub repository for WinForms and WPF. They're open source, free for anybody to take a look at, and you can see what they're working on right now on GitHub. Going to the next question that we have here from Z Timus asking, are there CMSes built with Blazor? So Blazor is not even a year old, being RTM. Blazor was released, Blazor WebAssembly was released to manufacturing, whatever you want RTM to be now. I guess it was released to manufacturing, but it's about 9 months old. It was released last May as part of Microsoft Build, that event. So we're about 9-10 months old into this cycle. No, there are no CMSs. There are no large-scale corporate-backed CMSs that run with Blazor yet. We're not even a year into this. So, right, to try and compare Blazor to some other frameworks that have been around for 10 plus years, I'm looking at you, Angular, Vue, Knockout, React. These technologies have been around for 10 years. It's not entirely an equal comparison. Is it possible to clone the session 0302 branch from the terminal? Yes, of course. Of course. You can clone and check out that branch. Yes. Absolutely. So, all right. Let's start talking about child components. So, when we build things with HTML, we're used to having tags nested within tags like this. And we're going to want to be able to do that with our tags in Blazor as we build components, right? I mean, this hat display component, if I want to put some extra things in here that do different formatting, that have extra information, how do I do that? So there is a property, right? So I have this parameter property down here that takes in this block of text, takes in a string for that name, and I can output it up there where I put the @name on line 5. But if I want to do that with tags and even other components, I can do that with something called child content. So let me go to my hierarchy demo over here, and now, oh shucks, oh, I'm getting ahead of myself. I've got, darn it, I'm giving up the ghost here, showing demos before they're ready. Look at this, still showing it. What? Go away. Thank you. So I can create a card component, and I can put other components inside that card component. So maybe I create a card header component and a card body component. Well, once again, those aren't HTML5 tags. Those aren't web components. I need to create those components, and I want those to render inside of my card. So this markup renders this content. It allows a lot of flexibility to put content inside of my components here. So how do we do that? How do we make these things work? I showed you how to pass a string in as a parameter. How do you pass tags and have it do stuff with that? Check this out. Let's get into this a little bit. So close that for right now, and we're not going to look at that. No. Clean this up. It's like an unmade bed here in Visual Studio Code. I'm going to declare tab bankruptcy and get back into this. So let me go over to that hierarchy. No, we don't even want to look at that. We're going to look at the card component. So here's that card component that is referenced right here, right? Card. And this is outputting a bootstrap card tag, right? And inside of it, I've got this child content. So there is a convention that you can use inside of your components to create a parameter, a public parameter of type render fragment. I'll talk about what render fragment is in a moment, but it's named child content. So child content is anything that's inside this card tag. Capture it and put it inside of this parameter. And wherever I put that at child content, it's just going to dump out whatever that content is. Further, if there's Blazor components that are part of that child content, it will render that content also. If there's HTML components, well, that's okay. It'll just pass them along and output that for me. So if I go back over to the initial demo up front here, right? So I had card header, card body, and right, I could put in here a little paragraph, put a bold tag, and hello world, Fritz was here. Save that, go back over here, and when this refreshes, hello world, Fritz was here. So that's output inside my card because it's part of the child content, right? It lifted up this because it's part of the child content and drops it in there. Now, I mentioned render fragment, and I said I was going to explain what that is. Render fragment is a method that you're handed that contains everything to render that block of content. So by just outputting child content there, right, I don't need to pass anything into it. It just dumps it out and just says, here's where this thing is, and writes it out right there. More on render fragment a little bit later when we get into templates. So real easy for me to lift this up and put whatever I want right there. Now, that's a little bit too flexible. We already saw I could pollute the content of my card component by putting this in here. Oh, wait a sec. I didn't show you card header and card body. Oh my goodness. Fritz, you're getting ahead of things. So there's my card header, and it just does the card header tag class from Bootstrap and just outputs whatever the child content is right there. Seeing a pattern? And my card body does the same thing. Literally identical, except they have different classes that we're passing in here. Okay, so that's a thing. But it's a little bit too flexible because it's almost like I can do HTML injection here and get it to do things that I don't want it to necessarily do. So let's take the concept that we had from the first demo of passing in a string and making that the header, and some of this with the child content, and let's see if we can clean this up a little bit. I'm going to go to this question that we have from Ramides in Twitch chat. Ramides says, in my opinion, it's very important to have long-term support. I experienced some bad situations with breaking code in the past. So there are Linux distributions that do offer long-term support. Of course, Windows has very long-term support cycles, upwards to 10 years that you will get support, paid support, unpaid support available to you. And .NET has tracking. .NET Framework ships with Windows and has the same support cycle as Windows. .NET Core, .NET 5 has the long-term support versions have 3-year support cycles, and you can re-up those whenever you like. There are current shipping versions of .NET and .NET 5 .NET Core and .NET 5 that you can opt into, and those have 3-month support cycles after the next version is released. So minimum 3-month support cycle, but once the next version is released, you have 3 months to upgrade before support stops. So you have the advantage of trying the latest and greatest features before it snaps to that long-term support instance and moves forward. So flexibility in how you want to use, and all of these operating systems and frameworks have support cycles that you can, long-term support cycles that you can jump into and be very successful with. Yes, Windows Server has very long support cycle plans. Very, very long, that you can jump into and use. Okay, so let's see if we can do something to combine these concepts here for the two types of content. So I put together another component called the card, and it takes a header text because I don't want to allow you to put images or things inside the header band here. I want it to just have whatever that text is. So Blazor hat is the text I'll pass in. This is one of Fritz's hats. Easy. That's okay. I can see that. Let's take a look at that component. So it was the card is that component. Here it is. So I'm still using a card header child component, and I'm still using a card body. But this time, instead of just receiving all the child content and outputting it, I'm taking whatever the child content is and I'm putting it inside the card body component. And whatever string attribute you pass in as the header text, I put inside the card header. Hey there, is that Alex F5? Which user interface am I using? So this is Blazor. You see it there in the title just below. And this is Blazor with WebAssembly. We're programming with C#. And I'm using Visual Studio Code on Linux to interact with. This is KDE we're using. So, and we're using Bootstrap layout in CSS. So this makes it a little bit easier to kind of force exactly the type of output and interaction with my component that I want, right? I get what I want my card to look like, and I've forced content into these locations. And I can do documentation with these. It's not going to give me, there it is. There was the summary tag, right? This is the header text for the card, right? Oh, come on now. There we go. So now when I go back over to, not that one, this is in 3, better card. So now when I'm interacting with my component, right? Yeah, I know. It will give me not just the name of it. Oh, come on. I'm expecting to see that IntelliSense pop up. In full Visual Studio, you'll get that IntelliSense. I'm not sure why it's not popping up here. I should see it as I start typing the component name and mouse over it. I should get the summary information appearing, but it's not popping up for me. No matter. So, I'm starting to get this separation here, and right, I can still put whatever I'd like inside of here as far as HTML, right? And it will format and output that content however I'd like inside of that. Question coming in on Twitch from Remedies. Not a problem. Let's answer this question. That's a good question. Is the .NET compiler directly assembling the WebAssembly file, or is there some sort of third-party compiler behind the curtain? No. The .NET compiler is assembling the WebAssembly files. So behind the scenes, I'm running .NET run. Let me take down your question here. I'm running .NET watch run. So let's take a look into exactly what's going on here. So when I .NET build, it builds the application and it outputs the content right there. There's a DLL that it builds and it puts everything, the Blazor output. So it's actually doing linking and tree shaking. It'll do the linking and tree shaking when it publishes, but it's putting it into this www root folder, so that can be parsed and loaded by the browser. So if I go into bin, debug, net5, and see, there's the XML and referencing for documentation. If I go into root framework, no, show me what's in there. there's all the DLLs, and even that have been gzipped for the browser to be able to work with. It's all being done for you behind the scenes by the compiler. No third-party compilers being brought in. This is all being rendered for you so that you can focus on building your application. So really, like I said at the beginning, stripping away all of that technical concern so you can just focus on building your application. So let me get that running again. And I don't want it running in Chrome. I want it running over in Firefox. I prefer Firefox, although I do need to use Chrome if I want to look at the debugger, but I don't think I'm going to look at the debugger today. So compiler is better than a non-compiler. I kind of agree with you. So this is great. I've got a card tag here that I can render with, which makes interacting with a collection of objects. And I've got, right, if I take a look at my hat class over here, right, I've got properties for name and theme and year, and I've got a couple of hats here working with this collection to just output a collection of cards. And then it's a snap. I don't really have to work too hard at this because I can write code that has, well, give me a flex layout for each H in my hat collection, output in the header the name, and I can put acquired in whatever year, right? And heck, let's just wrap that in bold, just to show that it is allowing me to pass along HTML inside of this. So I'll go back over here. Let me go back to my component demos and working with collections. And now, right, I'm outputting a collection of cards, one for each one of my hats. And it feels more HTML. I'm not having to go and change the concerns of how all of this works. It's quite simple for me to interact with this. Did I forget to save that collection? I put bold around the year, and that year value doesn't look bold. What are you doing here to me? What are you doing to me here? This is for collection show. There it is. Now it's in bold. Okay. So it's passing around this collection, and I'm able to interact with it so easily. Let me grab a couple questions here. Ramidi says a question. Can I fire up a terminal and create a Blazor project based WebAssembly file if there is some custom task to do? You're losing me here. You're going to create a Blazor project. Sure. .NET New, Blazor WebAssembly. And you create these Razor templates and they output and build WebAssembly for you. Yes. So I'm not sure what you mean by custom task to do. Benny, greetings to you in Belgium. Welcome in. And Z Timus points out the collection that I'm rendering, this could come from SQL. Yes, you could pull it out of a database, out of a data store. I don't want to limit us to just an SQL database. Maybe you're using a NoSQL database. Maybe you've got a collection of JSON files on disk that you're interacting with. Importantly, wherever you get that data, you can paint here. If you're running Blazor in WebAssembly, remember, it's running and rendering this content in the browser. So you can't connect to a database. You can only, because of the browser sandbox, you can only connect out to web services. So you can build an API service that acts as a facade for your SQL database. Maybe it has some security built into it as well. And you can interact with that and paint this data on screen. You can do that. That's very easy to understand, and it's an interaction, it's an architecture that folks who have been building JavaScript-based applications are very familiar with. building and interacting with, and it very much behaves the same way. However, if you're building a Blazor server-side operation, Blazor server-side project, you can take this content and query your database directly because it's running on a server behind the firewall in your data center. So you could reach out from your Blazor component and query a database directly. I recommend you don't query directly, but instead take in some sort of repository interface. And that repository, when you implement it in Blazor WebAssembly, has HTTP clients in it to query APIs. When it's running on Blazor server, sure, implement that repository so it queries the database directly with something like Entity Framework Core or Dapper, some object relational mapper that'll give you that interaction. So lots of flexibility, and that's something that I love about this. Build the way that makes you happy. So lots that you can do there. Let me go into a couple more questions that are coming in here before I move into the next sample. Bakir P asks, I hope I pronounced that right, let me know. What should you use for enterprise applications between Blazor, React, and Angular? The situation might be to migrate an existing app or to start a new application. The answer is going to be depends. It's always going to be depends. Me, as somebody who's a C# developer, who's very familiar with C#, very comfortable with C#, prefers to write with C#, I'm going to choose Blazor. Even though Blazor is the new one, Blazor is the one that's getting optimized, it's getting new features very, very frequently, very quickly now as we look towards .NET 6. It's giving me flexibility to use the language that I like. If you're a JavaScript developer and you enjoy working with Node and you enjoy building and working with JavaScript components, and that's something you're very comfortable with, go ahead and use React or Angular. They've been around for a very long time. There's a very established ecosystem out there that you can use to get components, to get things to make your user interfaces look great. The Blazor ecosystem is growing quickly. There's vendors out there like DevExpress, Infragistics, Progress, SyncFusion that make components that you can purchase. Let them handle and manage the support of those. You can purchase those that allow you to do some really great things with Blazor inside of your applications without having to think about how to use and build all that user interface stuff. Once again, to get you focused on building those things that you need for your business logic, because you are the subject matter expert for your application, for your business. Offload all that tech stuff. Let somebody who's good at building components and user interface build that for you and make your application look great. Next question coming in is from Alex F5, asks, is it possible to build a browser extension with WebAssembly to perhaps access the Chrome API? I haven't tried it. It's got to be possible. I don't know if Chrome allows you to interact with, allows the WebAssembly runtime to be executed when it's running inside the extension. I do know that you can absolutely go from Blazor into JavaScript. There's JavaScript interop there. We'll talk about that in a future session. But you certainly can reach from your Blazor application into JavaScript and then access and interact with the Chrome API. I don't know if Chrome allows the WebAssembly runtime to start up. That I'm going to have to leave to somebody else to answer. So, very good point there, Coldfire. Having more tools available in your toolbox doesn't invalidate the others. It just means you have more options, more choices, and that's a good thing. That means that you can build the way that makes you happy. Write software the way that you want to with the frameworks and languages that you like, that you prefer. That's terrific. That's an amazing thing that we want to see more of as we try to encourage more folks to become software developers and write more applications, because there's a ton of applications out there that need to be built. So, Lomas has a question here. Does the first session cover getting the project set up and started with Visual Studio Code? Yes. The previous session that we did, I do show how to do .NET New, Blazor WebAssembly. You open the file system in Visual Studio Code, have the C# extension installed, and all of the IntelliSense features will light up, will turn on automatically for you inside of Visual Studio Code. Works exactly the same way on Windows, Mac, and Linux, just like I'm showing here today. So you can take a look at that other video, and that'll get you pointed in the right direction. But you're opening a folder. You have the C# extension installed. C# extension it'll even suggest it to you when it sees that it's a Blazor application running in the folder, and should just prompt you to install at that point. So, all right, there we go. Let's move on. Let's talk about so collections, easy to interact with, really cool to be able to paint this stuff on screen and get a little bit of a, just say, output another one of these cards for me. All right, I can do that. But I want to add some style into these. And when we build components, we want to carry the style for our components with us, so that we don't have folks outside of our component going and making it look like however they want. We want to provide some default style that looks good and feels right for our component. So maybe I want to change the header for my component to blue. I want to make it a nice light blue color. And there's a nice fluffy blue color in the cloud for a cloud service provider. A little bit, you might have heard of it before. But we're going to use sky blue here. And there is a style sheet that Blazor will create for you when you create styles for specific components. Let me explain. This is called CSS isolation. So for our component, and particularly for our card header component, right? So we have card header. Here's what it looks like. But I can also have a card header Razor CSS file that contains just the style that I want to apply to this content, to this control. So wherever there's a card header class, make the background sky blue. In fact, let's start with that. So I'm going to save that with those changes, and this will reload, and now my cards have a sky blue header here. You need to reference this specific style sheet inside of your index.html or host HTML, and it's named after whatever the project name is, demo.styles.css. And that style sheet will include any of these CSS isolation files that have the exact same name as the component they want to modify, .css. So we want to modify card header Razor, the card header component, and we get that output. Okay. Well, let me show you a little bit more about this. Well, how's it doing that? What's going on there? Let's take a look at the source to this. That's not the right one. We don't want to look at that. Still not the right one. Let's look at the actual rendered source for this page. I'm going to scroll down here. Don't worry, I'm going to zoom in there on the HTML in just a second. See how we've got card header and it says the flash, right? And card header has this, it's got this little unique identifier next to it, B09 blah, 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 blah. Well, inside my demo style CSS, Blazor generated for me, it grabbed that CSS rule out of my card header CSS, merged it together so I have .card header brackets, and it has that attribute. So it'll only render that rule on the components that have that attribute. Now that makes it a little weird if you try and do some interactions, CSS rules to work with descendants of this. But it interacts with just those components. So I can get even less descriptive with this, and I can say, we'll just apply it to the div component. Okay, so I'll come back over here and it'll render. And if I scroll down here, it's still only on the headers there. I'll zoom back in on that flash hat that I have. And because, right, look, it put that attribute test on the div rule. So just divs that have that. So my card body that doesn't have that attribute, because it's not been isolated, doesn't have its own CSS, has just a regular plain interaction there, right? It doesn't have the blue background. So that's pretty cool. That works very nicely. And gosh, I could add, let's go just a little bit further here. Let's have some fun and let's add a card body, no, not card boy, card body razor CSS. And I'll put into this one a div rule, and let's say background color, and let's make the background color, I want to make it light gray. All right. So save those files, and I need now, it's a new file that I added into the mix. So I actually have to restart my .NET Watch. And it will, that's right. Is that Cot Eric? You're spot on there. It scopes the CSS only to the component that it's named after, that it mimics. So I'll reload here, scroll down, and now I get the light gray background on the bodies because it's scoped to those HTML elements, because it put that little extra, right? It put that little extra attribute on there, Blazor did, right? B639, blah, 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 blah. And there it is, scoped to that. So great point there, Eric. Thank you for pointing that out. You're right. So very cool. It gives us a way to be descriptive about how we want this to look, how we want to interact with it, and it actually refreshes. Well, I'm sorry, it's not this CSS, but not color, right? If I do, right, font weight, bold, and it automatically refreshes that CSS because it's being referenced, right? And hey, get me back up in here. Right, and now it's bolded. So lots of flexibility what you can do with this to generate a hierarchy of objects and deploy those classes and styling appropriately for your components. Let me go to this question from Uppercut Lance. How long does it take to download and load the .NET runtime in the browser? And is this a one-time operation the first time the Blazor site is accessed on a machine? Good question. We get this question a lot. Oh my gosh, you're loading the .NET framework. What the heck's going on there? When I'm running in dev mode, you can see right here, it loads 8 meg of resources. Are you kidding me? 8 meg. Yes and no. It's 8 meg, but we're in development mode. So there's optimizations. Just like if you were building with JavaScript using Webpack, there's optimizations that are going to be built in when we go to deploy. And when we do go to deploy, things get put into local storage. So if we go over here and we look at local storage, that's not the right one. It's down here, isn't it? No, where did I put it? Cache storage? Come on, show me where it is. There it is, Blazor resources. There's all the bits. They're downloaded once, they're cached aggressively by the Blazor runtime, and it's not downloaded again. Unless, of course, they clear out their cache. Then it will download it again. I have a more complete HATS website at CSharpFritz.com. And if you look at this website does use Blazor with WebAssembly. You can navigate here, and you can see that it does load up all this content. And if we look over here, it won't even tell you the Blazor WebAssembly stuff that it's loaded. It's not going and pulling down new content at all for that. But it crunches down to something like 2 meg that it's downloading for all those DLLs that it links and loads in the browser. And gosh, you can see for this application, 464, about half a meg that it downloaded. So this is hats.csharpfritz.com that you can go to. And you can see more and interact with a live Blazor WebAssembly application that's been published to the web and presented here. And this is using, I wrote a hat component that works with Bootstrap and does that card flip animation. So hats.csharpfritz.com. See a couple other questions coming in there in chat. Let me pause and go to those. Let me see here. Oh my goodness. So Evan Weeks says, I wish I could work with Blazor on a day-to-day basis. Unfortunately, all of the back office apps I maintain are ASP.NET MVC 5, and there's no budget for an upgrade yet. There will never be budgets for upgrades unless you justify them. What justifies and why you would need an upgrade. The performance will help justify an upgrade. Finding folks with the appropriate skill set, being able to hire folks that use the new technology, that's a reason for an upgrade. Some dramatic new feature that you're able to add easily with the new framework, that will help justify an upgrade. But you will never get a budget for an upgrade. But what you can do, Guacamole asks, well, can you mix ASP.NET MVC, the old .NET frameworks, with Blazor? So Blazor WebAssembly compiles down and runs as these DLLs that sit in the browser. This content that you're seeing here that's part of this demo is running on top of an index HTML file. This is a static page. There is no server-side content running here. It's all running out of this index HTML. Could you run it on top of MVC? Sure. It's not entirely clean, but you can certainly build this, copy over all the content, and deploy it as a segment of your ASP.NET MVC application. Doable. You're kind of, to borrow a Star Trek term, you're kind of Borging together, right? It's like the Borg. We're just jamming together various clumps of application frameworks. Doable. Just the same way you can put an Angular application on top of an MVC application. But something that you don't need to avoid. You can certainly make that work. You had a bunch of Silverlight applications. Those got upgraded for obvious reasons. Silverlight is very much folks are still using, and it's still under support now, I believe, until October or November 2021 is, I believe, when the support cycle ends for Silverlight. So that's one thing that, because the framework's going to be deprecated, you're going to need to migrate off of. And Robert Tables points it out properly there. When you're forced to migrate because the framework is being deprecated by the vendor, yeah, now you better find a budget to upgrade. So, but MVC is not going to be deprecated. ASP.NET MVC is not going to be deprecated because it ships with Windows. All right. So let's get back into the demos here. So we showed a little bit about CSS isolation, and that gives us even more flexibility now to go and build things and pass around exactly the way we want our components to behave. But what if we do want to expose a little bit of a template for how we want folks to interact with our content? So right? If I go back to, let me go back to that collection sample here, right? So down here, we had this collection right here, and we wrapped it in this div so that we had the flex layout so we could wrap our cards properly and get them to appear next to each other. And if I go back over, right, and we look at this, if I take my browser and I scale it down, come here, you. Come here. Right? It wraps nicely because I have that flex container around it. So it handles things nicely. But maybe I want to put that div with the flex capabilities, put that over inside of another component so that I don't have to remember to put that style on everything, right? I want to just have this container that'll do that for me. Because, let's face it, I'm not that smart to remember all this CSS flex stuff. I just want to put that somewhere where I can reference it when I need it. So, if we take a look at this, the next sample that I put together for you, about templates. So now I'll put in a hat template component that has some item inside of a collection. And we're going to pass in the hat collection. And I'll use this template that appears inside this hat content element to generate and output this content appropriately. So I'm handing off a little bit of the description, a little bit of how I want this to look and interact with. So what do I do? How do I make that work so I can hand that off? Hello over there on Learn TV. Welcome in. I'm keeping an eye on things there. It looks like that's Tasnim. Hello, welcome in. Thanks for stopping by. Happy to answer your questions on Learn TV and Twitch. So, how do we do this so we can hand off what these things should look like inside of our component, right? Because theoretically, right, I could make this, I could pass in a bunch of different ways that I want that to look. So let's scroll up here and let me show you what the hat template looks like. So there's my div style, display flex, blah, 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 blah. And I'm receiving as one of my parameters an items collection. And I put that same for each in here, for each var hat in items. So whatever my, I'm sorry, I called this hat, but it could be item, right? I could call that item, right? Heck, let's use the Visual Studio Code feature. F2 to rename, and I'll call it item, and it just updates everywhere. So, right, I'm going to just use my template here called hat content and format that. Now, here's another template. This is a render fragment, but it has a generic type, and it's of type T item. So that's where the type parameter here is. These two pieces go together, line 1 and line 12. You specify a type parameter because you're receiving a type that your template, your render fragment here, is going to handle and interact with. So I'm receiving, and I specify it here. Wrong sample. I want to be in 6. There we go. I'm receiving a typed item called hat, and I have my hat content template that has, here's the card that I want to format. Now, this context attribute specifies what the name of the variable is that is being yielded to me by that for each, right? So this for each, that item is being handed to me as H, and I can use H as a variable throughout here. And I'll, inside Visual Studio Code, I'll get IntelliSense, and it knows it's not doing the IntelliSense thing here for me. Reload window. Show me that you know what that thing is. You know what that is. Sure, go ahead, do that. No, I don't want the Emmet abbreviation. It's not doing, there it is. Now we got it loaded, right? So it knows what the year property is. With the wrench, it shows, I know what that is, right? Right, if I change that name, it knows what that is. So, right, it's formatting that content, and giving me that IntelliSense so I can work with it. So now this gets a little interesting. Now I've got my little template here that I can use to format things. I mean, I could technically do something like this, right? And heck, let me just grab this and drop that in there. And instead of the card, right? I mean, I could do something like this and put right at h dot name. We could put another one here, and we could do at h dot year, right? And what did I do? There we go. Right? And it's a little bit grumpy here because I forgot to close my hat template. There we go. So if I save that, I let that reload, right? Now I get that content output over here, right? Let's take a look at what that looks like. Down here, right there. Right, so a table, and it put that div inside of it for me. That's kind of annoying. Maybe I turn that off. Maybe I have a way to turn that off. Right, so if I go back over to hat template, right, I can add another parameter here, and I can make it optional. So let's make this a bool, and let's call this isFlex. Right, and we can default that to true. So it's optional. I don't need to specify it, right? But I can say if isFlex, output it like this, else, and I'll just output the exact same stuff. Go back over here, and instead of, right, just say isFlex equals false. Right, and I can even put a class on this, right? Isn't there a table class? I think there is. Inside of Bootstrap. There we go. So now it's a table. I'm using the same component, but I've changed my template that I'm passing in, and it formats appropriately the same content, right? Now I've got flexibility in how I render and pass these things around. So there's some interesting capabilities that start to come to the surface when we think about templating things and being able to pass in collections of objects or specific objects that we want it to format, but we want to give a little bit of a suggestion. Here's a little bit of information about what you want to format. Another thing I should point out, I'm using this context attribute to set the variable name to h. If you don't use that context bit there, you can reference and say context inside the template here, and it'll function and do the exact same thing instead of whatever parameter name, whatever variable name you want to use inside of your template. So you have flexibility, right? I love, and I hope that's a recurring theme that I know I've been saying a lot here. I hope that's a recurring theme that you're seeing and you appreciate is a part of this application model. So keeping an eye on things here. How we doing over there? Learn TV and Twitch. Doing well? Any questions that I can answer here as we go through? Because I've got one more bit that I want to take a look at here. I want to get in and talk about class libraries and how we can take everything that we've built now inside of our components And by convention, we put our components in a components folder. Realistically, you can put these wherever you'd like. But we, by convention, put these in a components folder that can then be referenced and shared throughout the application. But maybe you've got a collection of components that you want to make available to other folks inside of your organization. Maybe there's a standard card format or standard styles for how tables are formatted. I don't know, that your organization uses in all of your applications. Some standard business objects that every time that you have a client record formatted on screen, when a client record is formatted on screen, it always looks like this. You can do that. You can publish these. You can grab this and output it. You can place them inside of another project that can then be consumed by other libraries, by other applications, not just Blazor applications. You can reference them in ASP.NET Core applications as well. A couple questions coming in here from Twitch. Let me grab those and we can answer them. I'm going to grab these from Binary Nexus and from Marquee. So let me start with Binary Nexus. Do you have any tips for for dependency injection with Blazor? Buddy of mine is learning Blazor and was struggling with that part. Dependency injection with Blazor is a snap. Let me show you. I'll show you how to do this real quick. So I have my data object up here. Where'd it go? For my hat. And I have my collection of hats here. Let's move this out. Let's put this into its own class. So we'll create a class here. Let's call this hat repository so that we have something that we can inject. I'm going to leave this collection. I'm going to leave this here for right now, just so I don't break all of my code. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? But I'm going to make this private static read only, and I will add a method on here. Public IEnumerable hat, and I'll just call this get. No, I'm calling this get. You're thinking too much for me here. And just to make it simple, I'm just going to return collection as enumerable. You fool. You fool. Can I just do that? Will that work? I'm missing a using statement. We got that? Good. Okay. So I have this class that I can interact with. How do I inject this so that it's available inside of my various components, my various pages that I want to interact with? So let's inject this. I'm going to go over to program. I want to make this available. So just like we configure our dependency injection services, our services that the service locator is making available to us inside of ASP.NET Core, we do that here in the builder. So let's make our hat repository available to us. So we say builder.services and add, and I can add things that are just like in ASP.NET Core, scoped, singleton, or transient. For the purposes of this, I'm going to make it scoped, and it's data hat repository. There we go. Okay. So now whenever I ask for a hat repository, it's made available to us. Questions over the code. That should make it a little bit easier for you to see now that the question's gone away. So that's right. That's going to reference, and there's the get method over there in case you weren't able to see it earlier. This hat repository is going to be returned whenever I ask for it. So how do I request for this to be created and handed off to me inside of my page? Let me go back over to 6 template Razor. So inside of here, how do I receive that object? Well, we use just like in Razor templates with ASP.NET Core, I can use an inject directive, and I'm going to inject a hat repository. I'm just going to call this repository. So now that's just available to me. So in this first sample where I said hat collection, I can say repository get, and it will return. I need to so that I get that content. No, I need to make those available as the result. Can I do? I don't think it'll let me do that. No. This needs to be a collection that it's returning. So let's make this just hats, and I will go down to the bottom here, add a code block. I will create a property that is a IEnumerable of type hat called hats. And let me override. You're not going to let me do this, are you? Fine. Public override void on initialized. So one of the events on the page. And I will say hats equals hat repository get. It's not hat repository, it's just repository. There we go. Okay. Why don't you like that? Ah, it's protected, that's why. Okay. Cool. So now that will that will fail. Why? Can I convert from IEnumerable to iCollection? Fine. Come here. iCollection. I should be able to do it like this, right? There we go. That'll rebuild, right? Can I change? I already did that. Line 46. Do I still have it as... I reverted that. My bad. My bad. There we go. Rebuilding. Good. It's running. Refresh the browser. There's my content still. So now it's injecting all the way through and outputting appropriately exactly the content that I want. You think I can make that collection? There's a suggestion in chat. Maybe I can do something like this. Don't think it'll... Yeah. It doesn't want to execute that. And it's... Oh, it's the same thing. As iCollection hat. Let that reload. There it goes. Yep, that worked. So I didn't need to do the on initialize. No problem. The less code, the better. Know what I mean? So, there's another question here from Marquis asking, what if we wanted 2 or more parameters in hat content? You can't. Pass some sort of a facade object that has the various objects that you want to interact with. Right, so you end up with one object that contains the multiple things that you want to interact with. You have one context that you're passing around and interacting with. And right, inside the template, I don't think I can access that isFlex property. I don't think that's available to me. Let's see. I don't know. I haven't tried it. Yeah, names isFlex does not exist in the context. There, you can see it right there. So you can't do that. You're gonna need to wrap it up in, like I said, in some sort of a facade object that you're passing in. And now it builds properly. and reloads. There it is. So the other thing, Binary Nexus, to know about the dependency injection, if you do have a code behind, like we built for the counter, right? If you want to inject here, you can't create a constructor that has dependency injection. You have to do dependency injection through a parameter. So, through a property, I'm sorry. So you add a inject attribute to your property, and you specify the type that you want, data, hat, repository, there it is. And we'll call this repository. And I need a using statement. There we go. And we can say current count plus equals repository dot get dot count. That's kind of weird. But we're going to increment by the number of hats that are in the repository. Roll with me here. So there's my counter page, and it increments by 7s. So it is receiving the hats, and it is counting those appropriately. Kind of weird, but right, I took those couple extra steps to show off that other injection bit here, because it is slightly different, and it's not quite the way you'd expect. So you're welcome, Marquis. Thank you so much for the question. So how's it going there, Chris Jones? Good to see you. Let me see. Okay. Moving on. Let's take a look at taking our components now. Let's push that out into a library that we can reuse, that we can share with other folks, that we can bring into our projects and reference and get all those same benefits of working with those components, but they're shareable. We can put them in a .NET library, which then also means we can publish those to NuGet, to our package repository, so that other folks can download and use those same components. So when we think about making a library available and shared, especially for components, it's another project. So we're going to create another project, and I'm gonna run over here to another tmux window, and I already created a folder here called fritz.components. All right, I'm kind of cheating there. Let me show you. When we say .NET new, it is right here. So the Blazor libraries are here, right? And this one, okay? But down here, I went flying right by it, is Razor class library, right there. So this is where you put the project type that you put your Razor files into, and they will render properly and be referenceable as a component inside of your project. So if I create one of those, and like I said, I already created one here, but I'll create a new one just because I like you. All right, I'll create another one here. So .NET new and Razor class lib, and I'll call this live components. Okay. No, didn't want to do it that way. Bad idea. Razor class, right? Come here, you. Right, Razor class lib. Yeah, Razor class lib. .NET new Razor class lib output. That's what I was missing, the output parameter. And live components. There we go. So it's going to create a folder called live components for me. And I can reach into there. And now I have some components that I can interact with. So here's the project. It's the exact same project that I put into this Fritz component. So I'm going to get rid of that. So inside of here, we get an import statement. We get a component1 Razor and a component1 Razor CSS that we can interact with. And now, let me see what's going on here. Okay. Now I have a class library that has a component in it that I can reference. And just like we did before inside of our own Blazor project, I've got CSS isolation. And here's my component. A little class, and it's got a background image. That background image is sitting right here inside root, just like if it was inside of my Blazor project. I've even got a little bit of JavaScript interop here as well. But here's the content of my component. So this content I can now reference and use inside of other projects. So up inside of my demo project, I added a reference to the Fritz components project right there. Now I used the .NET command line to do that, to add that reference. So if I go into my demo project, right, I'll even remove this and show you that it re-adds, right? So .NET add reference, and I can point to another file on disk and say, go add a reference to that thing. So I'm going to go up one and into my Fritz components and say, add a reference to the project that's over there. And it adds that reference into the project. And now you see it put that item group back in here. So if you like slinging XML, you can edit your CSproj file directly. Or if you like working at the command line and doing this a little bit more programmatically, .NET add reference will add references to that. So, okay, once that's inside the project, I can now reference those components and place them inside of my pages. So down here I have 7 library, and I'm going to show you this first, right? The code is fritz.components.component1. It's kind of an ugly tag name, but follow me here for a second. It's coming out of a project called Fritz Components. So everything inside that project by default has the namespace fritz.components. So component 1 has a full name of fritz.components.component1. So the contents of that component are going to be output here. I could shorten that by putting a using statement onto the page or into my imports and trim up some of that. But if I go back here and I click and go into my libraries demo, I get the background, this candy striping, and that red dashed border that comes out of the CSS. So I've got CSS isolation happening, and it's referencing and bringing in an image that are shipped as part of that other project. How's it doing that? Where's that stuff getting put on disk? How's it being loaded into the browser? These questions and more we can answer with developer tools. Let's take a look. Let's see where this stuff comes in from. So I'm going to reload it just so I can get the complete list of things here loading in. So there's my demo style CSS, right? And it particularly, let's make sure we show my component, and it's got a similar tag there that we saw for the CSS isolation earlier. I'll go back over to network. Well, first off, there's the CSS isolation being loaded in, right? The rule, it's being parsed and painted for me properly so that I can see what's going on there. I'll go back over to network, and for the CSS there, check this out. Demo style CSS. Let's look at the response. Look at this first line right here. Import, right? That's the standard CSS thing. Import the CSS at _content fritz.components. fritz.components.bundle.scp.css. Look at this. So what Blazor is doing is it's cracking open. It's cracking open the DLL. It's cracking open the package, grabbing this CSS file, and making it available on a location that, whoop, I'm about to go off my green screen, at a location that has the same name as the package. So this is being brought in automatically for us with that CSS isolation inside of my demo styles CSS. It automatically wires up. It automatically takes all of that content that was built inside the package and makes it available to us. Cool. Now we're talking. So this means all the styles that I want by default for my components live and get added into my package, into my applications automatically. So very cool stuff. I am going to have to end a little bit early here. I have a tech doing some work at the house here that I need to get to, but I want to make sure that you see this is being referenced directly and added in for me. I didn't have to change any code inside my application. I just had to add that reference, use my control, and this appears for me. Last thing that I want to show you, go back over to the things that are referenced here. Well, that image is being loaded where? Let me do Control F5 so we get it, everything loaded up for me there. There we go. So, right, there's my demo style CSS. That had that import statement in it. And there's the other CSS that was packaged up for me, being referenced right there. There it is. It's not importing, it doesn't have any child content, but here's the content that was imported into the final CSS sheet. But because this has that background URL reference there, there it is, background URL, the candy striping. And if we take a look at the headers, you see it went through localhost 5000, content, Fritz components. Once again, it's reaching into this content Fritz components. It's cracking open the package that was referenced and grabbing that image out of it and making it available to paint in the browser. Very cool stuff. That means that you can now take your components, lift them directly out of your Blazor project, put them inside the Razor class library, and these things will just come along for the ride and be available to paint on screen. So, I'm not going to migrate the cards into this project. Maybe I'll leave that as something for you to try out on your own. You know what? Maybe let me do that after. I'll put that in the samples after we get done here. So, but I do need to wrap up. I do need to call this a day, and get moving on to get you moving on to the next broadcast, and let's get you having a good time with somebody else, whether it's on Learn TV or it's over here on Twitch. Let's wrap it up and head back over here. Thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in. I hope you had a great time learning about components with Blazor today. It was a lot of fun showing you all the cool things that you can do with it, whether it was CSS isolation, Razor class libraries, composing components, and using child content to get HTML and other components rendering inside of other components. And we even looked at templates, how you can provide a little bit of formatting that you want a component to use to format whatever object you're passing into it. I really appreciate you tuning in today. Thank you so much there, Cot Eric, Sector, Shy Sharp. Really appreciate you hanging out today. For those of you that are watching over on Learn TV, I hope you have a great rest of your day and check out some more great content on Learn TV. And if you're watching on YouTube, check out links to the rest of the C# with CSharpFritz playlist. It's going to be right up here, and there's another video for you to check out right down here about Blazor that I produced for you. Make sure you check those out, and have a great rest of your day.